Millionaire CEO interviews a single mother by mistake. What she did next shocked everyone. When Hannah Mitchell walked into the gleaming headquarters of Vertex Technologies for what she thought was a receptionist position, she had no idea she'd been accidentally scheduled to interview for the executive assistant role to the notoriously demanding CEO, Alexander Reed. Even more surprising, instead of correcting the mistake, she decided to play along. A split-second choice that would not only change her life forever, but would transform an entire company culture that had forgotten the meaning of compassion. What happened in that interview room would leave everyone from the HR director to the board of directors completely speechless. If you're already intrigued by this unexpected collision between a desperate single mother and a powerful CEO who's about to meet his match, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories about courage, second chances, and the moments that remind us how our greatest challenges often lead to our most extraordinary opportunities. Hannah Mitchell was running late. Again. At 32, the single mother of 6-year-old Lily had mastered the art of barely keeping it together. This morning had been particularly chaotic. Lily had spilled orange juice on her only clean school uniform. The babysitter had called in sick, and Hannah's ancient Toyota had made an ominous clicking sound that she absolutely could not afford to investigate. After dropping Lily at her neighbor's apartment with profuse thanks and promises to pick her up by 6, Hannah had navigated rush-hour traffic with one eye on the clock and the other on her gas gauge, which hovered dangerously close to empty. She couldn't be late for this interview. Not when the rent was 2 weeks overdue and her last unemployment check had already been stretched beyond recognition. Vertex Technologies occupied a sleek glass tower in the heart of downtown, the kind of place Hannah would normally walk past without a second glance, assuming nothing inside had anything to do with her life. But the receptionist position they'd advertised offered health insurance from day one and a salary that would finally give her and Lily some breathing room. She parked in the visitor's lot, wincing at the $15 fee that would mean skipping lunch for the next 3 days, and hurried inside. The lobby was all polished marble and minimalist furniture, making Hannah acutely aware of her secondhand blazer and the small coffee stain on her only pair of dress pants that she'd tried to cover with a strategic placement of her purse. "I'm here for an interview," she told the impossibly polished woman at the front desk. Hannah Mitchell, 10 a.m. appointment. The receptionist, exactly the type of person Hannah hoped to become if she got this job, tapped at her computer with manicured nails. "Yes, Ms. Mitchell. You're expected on the 30th floor. Executive suite." She handed Hannah a visitor's badge. "The elevator will need this for access." Hannah nodded her thanks, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel as she headed for the bank of elevators. Executive suite? That seemed odd for a receptionist position, but perhaps all interviews were conducted there. The elevator whisked her upward, her stomach lurching slightly at the speed. When the doors opened on the 30th floor, she stepped into another world, one of hushed conversations, original artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. A young man in a perfectly tailored suit approached her immediately. "Ms. Mitchell? I'm Kevin Park, HR Director. Thank you for coming in today." He extended his hand, which Hannah shook, hoping her palm wasn't as sweaty as it felt. "We're running a bit behind schedule," Kevin continued, leading her down a corridor. "Mr. Reed's previous meeting ran long, but he should be ready for you shortly. Can I get you anything while you wait? Water? Coffee?" Hannah's confusion must have shown on her face because Kevin paused. "Is everything all right?" "I'm sorry," Hannah said. "I think there might be some confusion. I'm here for the receptionist position." Kevin frowned, consulting his tablet. "I have you down for the executive assistant interview. For Mr. Reed's office." Hannah's heart sank. There must be a mistake. The job I applied for was definitely for a receptionist. Kevin's expression shifted from confusion to embarrassment. "Oh dear. It seems there's been a mix-up in our scheduling system." He lowered his voice. "The thing is, Mr. Reed is expecting to interview his next potential assistant right now. He's already irritated about being behind schedule." Hannah bit her lip. "I should probably go, then. Maybe we can reschedule for the receptionist position?" Kevin looked genuinely distressed. "The receptionist position was filled yesterday. I'm so sorry about the confusion." The news hit Hannah like a physical blow. That job had been her last hope after weeks of rejections. She thought of the past due rent notice, Lily's need for new shoes, and the clicking sound in her car that wouldn't fix itself. Before Kevin could say anything else, a door at the end of the hallway opened, and a man's voice called out, "Kevin, where's my next appointment?" Kevin winced. "That's Mr. Reed. Look, why don't you just go in for the interview? The executive assistant position pays 3 times what the receptionist role would have. It's demanding, but 3 times." Hannah repeated, her mind racing. That kind of salary would change everything for her and Lily. "Kevin." The voice was more insistent now. "Coming, sir." Kevin called back. He turned to Hannah. "It's your call. I can explain the mix-up, or you can go in there and give it your best shot." Hannah took a deep breath. She had exactly nothing to lose. "I'll do the interview." Kevin looked relieved. "Follow me." He led her to a corner office with windows on 2 sides and a desk that probably cost more than her car. Behind it stood Alexander Reed, CEO of Vertex Technologies, and, according to the business magazines Hannah had skimmed while preparing for her interview, one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the country. At 38, Alexander Reed had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. Tall and fit, with dark hair just beginning to gray at the temples, he wore his expensive suit like armor. His face might have been handsome if not for the impatient frown that seemed permanently etched between his brows. "Mr. Reed, this is Hannah Mitchell," Kevin said, gesturing for Hannah to take a seat opposite the desk. Reed barely looked up from the document he was reading. "You're late, Kevin." "Actually, sir, Kevin began. "It was my fault," Hannah interrupted. "Traffic was terrible. I apologize for the delay." Reed finally looked at her, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Punctuality is non-negotiable in this position, Ms. Mitchell." "I understand," Hannah said, meeting his gaze steadily despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "It won't happen again." Reed seemed slightly taken aback by her directness. He nodded to Kevin, who took the cue to leave, closing the door behind him. "So," Reed said, leaning back in his chair, "tell me why you think you're qualified to be my executive assistant." Hannah had exactly 2 seconds to make a decision that would either end this interview immediately or give her a fighting chance. She chose the latter. "I'm organized, efficient, and I solve problems before they become problems," she said, channeling confidence she didn't feel. "I understand that your time is valuable, and my job would be to maximize that value by handling everything else." It wasn't entirely a lie. As a single mother working multiple jobs while finishing her degree online, Hannah had become an expert at organization and efficiency out of sheer necessity. Reed's expression remained neutral. "Your resume shows gaps in your employment history. Explain." Hannah hesitated. The truth, that she'd had to leave her last steady job when Lily was born and her boyfriend walked out, that she'd been cobbling together part-time work ever since while trying to finish her business degree, seemed too personal, too likely to disqualify her immediately. But something in Reed's calculating gaze made her decide that anything less than honesty would be transparent. "I'm a single mother," she said simply. "My daughter is 6. When she was born, I had to leave my position at Meridian Financial because they wouldn't accommodate my need for a flexible schedule. Since then, I've worked a series of part-time jobs while completing my business degree online. The gaps represent periods when childcare became unaffordable and I had to find work I could do from home." She expected dismissal. Instead, Reed looked interested. "That must have been challenging," he said, his tone unreadable. It is," Hannah admitted. "But it's also taught me how to prioritize, how to work efficiently under pressure, and how to solve problems with limited resources. I believe those skills would be valuable in this position." Reed studied her for a moment longer, then fired off a series of rapid questions about her technical skills, her experience with scheduling and travel arrangements, and her ability to handle confidential information. Hannah answered each one honestly, admitting when she lacked experience, but emphasizing her ability to learn quickly. "This position requires long hours," Reed said finally. "Often early mornings, late nights, sometimes weekends. How would you manage that with your family situation?" The question was probably illegal, but Hannah chose to answer it anyway. "I have a support system, neighbors who help with childcare, a flexible after-school program. And I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Reed. I've been taking online classes at night after putting my daughter to bed for the past 3 years. I understand what long hours means." Reed nodded slowly, then stood up. "Wait here." He left the office, closing the door behind him. Hannah exhaled shakily, wondering if she'd just ruined her chances by being too honest. Through the glass wall, she could see Reed speaking with Kevin in the hallway, their expressions serious. After what felt like an eternity, Reed returned, followed by Kevin and an older woman Hannah hadn't seen before. Ms. Mitchell, this is Patricia Winters, our Chief Operating Officer, Reed said. I'd like her to continue this interview. Hannah stood to shake Patricia's hand, confusion and disappointment washing over her. Clearly, Reed was passing her off, uninterested in continuing the interview himself. Alexander tells me you have a unique perspective on efficiency, Patricia said, her tone warm but professional. I'd like to hear more about that. For the next 30 minutes, Hannah found herself engaged in a surprisingly in-depth conversation about operational efficiency, time management, and problem solving. Patricia asked about specific challenges Hannah had faced and how she'd overcome them. To Hannah's surprise, Reed remained in the room, listening intently but saying nothing. One last question, Patricia said finally. If you were to take on this role, what's the first thing you would change about how Alexander's office operates? Hannah glanced at Reed, whose expression remained unreadable. This was clearly a test and possibly a trap, but she'd come this far with honesty. Based on what I've observed today and what I researched about the company, she began carefully, I would implement a more effective prioritization system for Mr. Reed's time and attention. From the scheduling confusion this morning to the way his previous meeting ran long, it seems there might be inefficiencies in how information and requests reach him. Reed's eyebrow raised slightly, but he didn't interrupt. I would create filters, Hannah continued, warming to the subject. Not every email needs his immediate attention. Not every meeting needs to be an hour. Not every decision needs to cross his desk. My job would be to ensure that what reaches him is truly what requires his unique expertise and authority, freeing him to focus on the strategic decisions that actually grow the company. A silence followed her answer. Patricia and Reed exchanged a glance that Hannah couldn't interpret. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, Patricia said finally. Kevin will show you out. And just like that, the interview was over. Hannah followed Kevin back to the elevator, her hopes fading with each step. She tried her best, but clearly, she wasn't what they were looking for. You did well in there, Kevin said quietly as they waited for the elevator. Better than the last 4 candidates combined. Hannah managed a small smile. Thank you for saying that. And I'm sorry about the mix-up. Actually, Kevin hesitated, I should tell you something. There wasn't really a mix-up. Hannah frowned. What do you mean? The receptionist position was filled, that's true. But we deliberately called in candidates from various job applications for the EA position. Mr. Reed's idea. He said traditional recruiting wasn't finding the right fit. The elevator arrived before Hannah could process this information. She stepped inside, turning to face Kevin. So this was some kind of test? Kevin shrugged apologetically as the doors began to close. We'll be in touch, Ms. Mitchell. The drive home was a blur of confusion and disappointment. Hannah stopped for gas, wincing as she put the last $15 from her wallet into the tank. Just enough to get through the next few days of job hunting. Again, she picked up Lily from the neighbor's apartment, grateful when Mrs. Patel waved away her offer to pay for the impromptu childcare. How did your interview go? The older woman asked. Interesting, Hannah replied, not wanting to get into the details in front of Lily. But I don't think I got the job. Their loss, Mrs. Patel said firmly. You're the most capable person I know. Hannah smiled gratefully, though the compliment did little to ease the knot of anxiety in her stomach. That night, after Lily was asleep, she sat at their small kitchen table with her laptop, searching for new job listings and trying not to think about the rent notice taped to their refrigerator. Her phone rang at 9:15 p.m., an unknown number. Probably a spam call, but Hannah answered anyway. Ms. Mitchell? This is Alexander Reed. Hannah nearly dropped the phone. Mr. Reed. Hello. I apologize for calling so late, he said, his voice different somehow than it had been in the office. Less clipped, more human. I wanted to speak with you directly about the position. Hannah braced herself for the rejection. I understand. Thank you for considering me. No, you don't understand, Reed said. I'm offering you the job. Hannah sat in stunned silence. Ms. Mitchell, are you there? Yes, she managed. I'm just surprised. Your honesty today was refreshing, Reed continued. And your assessment of my office's inefficiencies was spot on. Patricia and I agree that you have exactly the perspective we need. Thank you, Hannah said, still processing. May I ask about the details? Hours, salary. Reed named a figure that made Hannah's breath catch. It was more than triple what she'd expected from the receptionist position, enough to move to a better apartment, enough for Lily's education fund, enough to finally have some security. The hours will be demanding, Reed continued. But I'm prepared to be flexible when it comes to your daughter's needs. School events, doctor appointments, we'll make it work. I just need to know about them in advance. That's very generous, Hannah said, wondering if she was dreaming. It's practical, Reed corrected. You were right today. My time is valuable, and I need someone who can maximize it. You've been doing that with far fewer resources in your own life for years. I'm simply recognizing that skill. They discussed start dates and paperwork, and Reed promised that Kevin would email her all the details in the morning. When the call ended, Hannah sat at her kitchen table for a long time, tears of relief and disbelief streaming down her face. The next morning, Hannah woke to an email from Kevin confirming everything Reed had said, along with new hire paperwork and a request to start the following Monday. It was really happening. Her first day at Vertex Technologies was a whirlwind of orientation, paperwork, and introductions. Kevin showed her to her desk, positioned just outside Reed's office in the executive suite, and walked her through the complex calendar and email systems. Fair warning, he said quietly. Mr. Reed goes through assistants quickly. The last one lasted 3 months. The one before that, 6 weeks. Why? Hannah asked. Kevin shrugged. He's demanding. Expects perfection. Doesn't tolerate excuses. Neither do 6-year-olds, Hannah replied with a small smile. I'll be fine. Her confidence was tested almost immediately when Reed arrived, already firing off instructions and handing her a stack of files before he'd even reached his office. I need these summarized by noon. Meeting notes from yesterday on my desk in an hour. And find out why the Davis contract is delayed. Hannah nodded, already making mental notes. Your coffee is on your desk. Black, no sugar. And I moved your 10 a.m. with marketing to tomorrow so you can prepare for the board presentation properly. Reed paused, looking at her with surprise. How did you know about the board presentation? It's on your calendar for Thursday, but there were no prep sessions scheduled. I assumed you'd need time to prepare, and the marketing meeting seemed less time-sensitive based on the agenda they sent over. A flicker of approval crossed Reed's face before he nodded and disappeared into his office. By the end of her first week, Hannah had established a rhythm. She arrived at 7:30 a.m., half an hour before Reed, to organize his day and prepare the information he would need. She streamlined his email, created a color-coded priority system for his calendar, and began gently but firmly enforcing time limits on